Hey guys, Claude here, and welcome to another episode of I'm Bad at Painting, and so can you. This is the show where I put my average painting skills on display in an effort to help you in your painting journey. Maybe I'll teach you a trick that you didn't know, or a technique you hadn't discovered yet, or just help motivate you by seeing a painter that reminds you how far you've come since your first miniature. For the record, I don't actually think I'm bad at painting. I just don't think I've reached a level that I can say I've mastered the skill. Now, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you can be the first to see when I post new videos. A quick side note before we get started, if you want to see a step-by-step workup of the red that I'm putting on this cape, I do have a separate video where I walk you through that process. You can click the link in the corner or find it in the description to check out later. We've all had that moment in painting where it can be hard to decide what model to paint, or what color scheme to use, or even to pick up the paintbrush at all. If you haven't, trust me, you will someday. There are days when I find myself eyeing my models for what seems like hours, trying to will myself to put paint to model, but I can't because of one reason or another. Whether you struggle with your mental health, like I do, or are tired of always painting the same color in that army you're working on, or just want the model to be done so you can show it off to your friends, patience and motivation can be two of the biggest mountains we find ourselves tasked with ascending. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about this topic, and hopefully we can help you and me rekindle our drive to finish that next batch of Space Marines, or your friend's Dungeons & Dragons character, or maybe a commission you're just not that into painting. For the record, I'm not a licensed counselor or anything like that. I'm just a painter who feels like I can share some of the tips that I've used to overcome some of these obstacles. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, but Claude, you are painting and releasing videos of your painting. Surely you don't have motivation issues. Well, that is an illusion. If that floats your boat, or tickles your pickle, or flims your flames to steal one from Jay at Eons of Battle, I have struggled with motivation every day of my painting life, and not just in the ways you might think. Weird flex, I know. Take good old Lord Crackerjack here. When did I buy this? It's likely been almost 2 years since I bought the Start Collecting box that included him, and this is actually the second time I've attempted to paint him. The first time, there were a lot of things that got in my way. My painting skill level, the paint scheme I chose, the box art setting unrealistic expectations for what mine looked like, or maybe it was just all the bibs, and bobs, and skulls, and trim, and everything else that gets thrown onto a chaos model. Motivation is the general desire or willingness of someone to do something, whether that be flying an airplane, playing in an orchestra, or putting globs of paint on less than an ounce of plastic, resin, or metal. We all have a reason for joining this hobby, and there are likely as many as there are models to be painted. Some of us started because we had a specific game in mind that required minis, while some of us wanted a physical representation of the fantastical creature we saw in our head. Yet others got into this hobby for no other reason than to create something beautiful that they could display proudly. Part of motivating yourself comes down to figuring out why it was you started in the hobby. I know that when I started, my motivation centered around creating pieces that I could use in my Dungeons & Dragons games I was running with my friends. However, my motivation has changed over the years that I have been doing this hobby. I'm more motivated now to paint miniatures for the tabletop games I play, or will likely play in the future, like Blood Bowl or Age of Sigmar. I also like to post my miniatures on my Instagram feed so that others can see what I've painted. Understanding why you got into this hobby, as well as why I'm still in this hobby, helps me in a lot of ways. From determining what models I will paint, to what paint schemes I use, to where I get them from, because I can tell you there is nothing worse than trying to paint a model that you have absolutely no interest in painting. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, that's all well and good, Claude, but how is any of this going to help me with my painting? Well, here's the practical advice that you were probably wondering if I'd ever get to. First, paint something you want to paint. Find a model that speaks to you, even if it's not the one you have to complete by next week. The one you can imagine painted in your head, or the one that you can see on the tabletop, standing victorious over all of your friends' models. These are the models that will always be a joy to paint. You can find yourself getting lost in the paint as you bring out the gleam of a sword or the reflection of the sun on a patch of skin, and this might just motivate you to pick up that model you've been dreading. Number 2, understand what you enjoy painting. If you like painting skin tones, find a mostly nude model. No one's gonna judge you. If NMM or TMM is your jam, then find someone clad in plate mail. It could be somewhere in between, but if it's something that you like to paint, it will make it easier to pick up that paintbrush and slay the gray. Number 3, gauge your own interest in painting that day. Determine if you have that boundless joy for painting, and anything you bring to the table must be painted that day. If so, these are great days to tackle those niggling little parts of a model, like the skull shoved on a spike on a shoulder pad, or the helmet hanging loosely from someone's belt. These little pieces will take no time to knock out if you're truly invested in painting at that moment. If you're not truly invested, find something big and easy to paint, like a cloak or a large area of skin or armor. These areas will help show you that progress that often helps drive our motivation to paint. You might even find yourself invested after finishing these larger sections. And finally, if you have even less investment than that, like if your circle in the area are around 0, try not painting. Seriously, take a break. You could be experiencing hobby burnout, and pushing it further could alienate you further from your joy of painting. It is perfectly okay to choose to do something other than painting. That model that you're working on, it'll be waiting for you when you come back. Now, will the above solve all of your problems? No, not likely. They might not help you at all, but that's okay, because I don't intend this to be an exhaustive list that will solve hobby burnout in one 20-minute YouTube video. What I intend this to do is to make you think about why you paint and what drives you. Finding that will help you the most with clearing out that pile of shame. So right now, you're probably thinking, man, Claude, that was a great conclusion. But you still have half a video yet to go. You'd be right, because we still have to talk about the second part. Patience. I'm not going to give you the definition of patience, because I think we can all imagine the forms it takes when it comes to our hobby. It can be allowing the paint to dry between layers, slowing down our brush strokes so they come out evenly, or even taking time to walk through our steps without rushing. Patience can be one of the greatest weapons we have in our arsenal against plastic. Or it can be our worst enemy if we don't keep it under control. If we're patient with our paint, we'll eventually get down that technique we've been working on. And if we're patient with ourselves, we'll more quickly get to that ideal image we have floating around in our heads, and have a lot more fun in the process. Patience is one of the things that I've definitely contended with a lot as I've learned about painting and completed more models. As I said in the intro, I struggle with my mental health, specifically ADHD and anxiety, and I can often find myself getting caught up in the mental picture that I have of the finished product or what's on the box, or in thinking that I've not made as much progress as I want to, or getting frustrated at finding yet another unpainted part of the model yet to be completed. It doesn't help that I chose Chaos as my faction either. It also doesn't help that we're living in a golden age of miniature painting, where every place you look, there's another professional or master level model that just makes you feel like you don't measure up. I've often gotten disheartened scrolling through my Facebook or Instagram feed or watching YouTube videos and thinking, man, I really wish my models looked like that. I'm not as good of a painter as these people, and maybe I never will be. But then I remind myself that maybe that person has been painting for a decade longer than me. Or maybe they're showing me the best parts of their model and hiding those imperfections that I all too clearly see on mine. Maybe they went through the same mental battle that I went through just to get out the paint bottle, put it on the palette, and slap it on the model. I don't know these things, but they help me remain centered on my own painting journey and be sure that I'm judging myself against my past works rather than someone else's now. So, what can be done to help us be patient with ourselves and our current reality when we feel like we just don't have the same amount of talent as these other painters? Number one, keep yourself focused on what you've done more than on what you have left to do. When you find yourself looking at the 1,257 pieces of trim you have left to painstakingly paint and line and shade on that Chaos horse, not to mention the armored knight that's sitting on his back, take a look at what you've done so far. No one says you can't find something on the model to be proud of even if the model's not done. Use that as your motivation to keep going. Number two, take a break if you need it. If you feel that frustration or anger or madness or whatever you want to call it, maybe Bob, bubbling up inside of you, walk away for a moment. It's okay. I won't tell. Or paint something else. Or meditate. Or take a walk. Or do something that allows you to reassess what you're doing and why you're doing it, and come at it with a renewed sense of focus and drive. Number three, don't compare yourself against what someone else has painted. It's not like everything has to be a competition. As I said before, we live in a time with an unprecedented amount of content related to our hobby. If you search for mini painting on YouTube, you'll find dozens of videos, hundreds even, related to our hobby and how to be better, or how to make this specific process go faster, or things that you should know about such and such a topic before you get started. And all of the painters that make these videos, they all seem to be the best of the best at what they do. But they're not you, and they're not at the level you may be at. So remember that when you're sitting down to paint. Lastly, and probably most importantly, be kind to yourself. You can be your own biggest cheerleader in this hobby, but you can also be your own worst critic. You're the one who knows about the spot of paint you missed on the bottom of the model that's covered by a shadow and the base of the model. But you're also the one that knows about that shield that you totally nailed the lighting on. That shield, it says far more about you as a painter than the spot hidden under the horse next to the rock on top of the base. Remember, your progress is just that. Yours. It's okay to take inspiration from what other people have done. But try to remember that these other painters, they might be in a different place than you. Or they might be going through the exact same things that you go through when you're painting a model. So, now that I've gone all Tony Robbins on you, where do we go from here? How do we get the above tips to work so that we can be better motivated and patient miniature painters? I don't know. I'm still trying to work that out myself. As I said before, I struggle most days to pick up the brush for one reason or another. Maybe I'm not sure what color scheme I'm going to use or if it will look right. Maybe I'm not sure if this is the model I should be working on right now, or maybe something else will get more likes and clicks. Maybe there's something around my house that I should be doing right now. Maybe I'm not ready to paint this model because I'm not good enough, or it will take too long, or I haven't mastered this or that skill yet. But you know what? I'm still going to find a way to get myself to pick up that brush, and you should too. Our hobby is better when more people are a part of it, and that includes you. So while I can't give you all of the answers, maybe I can leave you with some tips to help you feel better when you paint. Number 1, paint more models. If you have the choice between a box of orcs that includes like 37 million models and the Grey Knights that includes like 5, choose the orcs. The more you paint, the better you'll get. Things like brush control and timing don't come about overnight. I bet those painters that have flawless skills when it comes to panel lining and edge highlighting have probably done it hundreds of times. They were likely struggling like you are if you're only on your first or second model that requires those steps. Number 2, try out different skills. Maybe 2-brush blending is a challenge for you, but maybe you kick butt at layering. Both skills are valuable, and both have their place in our hobby. Maybe shift your hobby load so that you layer more than you blend until you feel fully comfortable with that skill. And lastly, find something to be proud of every time you sit down with a brush, even if it's not from this paint session. Your successes will help you bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be faster than focusing on the things you do badly. So, thank you for joining me on this episode of I'm Bad at Painting, and so can you. If you liked today's video, be sure to smash that button faster than it takes paint to dry out on a dry palette. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe. And until next time,